Hello, Daylight Church Online. I'm H.L. Hussman. I'm the lead pastor here at Daylight, and we just want to say thanks for tuning into our broadcast and being a part of our online community. We've been brainstorming ways that we can effectively and efficiently connect more with people in remote locations that are watching us online, and I have a few opportunities I'd like you to know about. Number one, if you would introduce yourself, we would love to know you. You can email online@daylightchurch.com. That's online@daylightchurch.com. Just tell us who you are, where you're watching from, how you found out about us, and any other relevant information that you wanted to share. We would love that opportunity. Secondly, we have a website, mydaylightchurch.com, and on that website is a tab that says Join the Daylight Crew. There's things that you can do off-site that would benefit us and allow you to engage more with the community. You can join our prayer team and our prayer ministry. You can join our study team and our service team. You can join our small groups, and we're happy to Zoom you in. There's all kinds of opportunities on that tab, and we would appreciate if you would fill it out and make yourself known to us. If you believe that Daylight is kind of your home away from home and you don't have a faith community of your own, and you would like to support and be a part of this financially, you can do so at daylightchurch.com/giving or by texting the number 84321 and completing a short form and selecting Daylight Church as the place you're going to give. If there's any way we can serve you, we would love the opportunity, and you can always reach us at online@daylightchurch.com. Thanks, and enjoy the service. As many of you know, I'm about to start a sabbatical starting tomorrow, and self-care has been on my mind. And if I'm going to be totally honest, I've got a kind of bad case of senioritis where I'm practically out the door already. And so I don't know what you're in store for today, but I do want to talk about self-care, self-love, and self-compassion and what that looks like and how it relates to the Christian message and Christian theology. And I want to argue that it could be, and I kind of wish I had put a question mark at the end of this, the foundation of all virtue, that loving others well, there's a huge component to loving yourself well. And as I was talking about with my wife, I often run by what I'm talking about on a Sunday morning with my wife ahead of time, and she usually has some pretty good wisdom for me. But when I was talking about self-care and the need for kind of a self-centered, self-focused love, she said these words. She said, it goes against everything we were ever taught. And I grew up in a campus ministry where we had 7:14 a.m. prayer every weekday morning as college students. We were expected to we did outreach at lunchtime. We would fast a lot of times, and at lunchtime we would do outreach on the campus. And then we'd have our Wednesday night Bible study and our Monday night Bible study and our Thursday night Bible study and our community group on top of all that, and then outreaches and then missions trips and retreats. And on the mission trips, you were expected not to bring back in those days, it was a Discman or a Walkman with you. You weren't expected to bring music. You were expected to stay focused and stay prayerful and stay with your heart in ministry. And there was this go, 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 go mentality. And I've certainly, most definitely carried that into ministry with me. And I'm started to realize just how unhealthy some of that is and how it kind of doesn't line up with the gospel. And thank you, Jordan, for my 1A man corner. I love you, man. I've talked about this song from Warren Barfield before in a positive light, but I want to paint it in a different light today. And I've even referred to this song as kind of the central theme of Daylight Church. And it's this driving, soulish. It's an amazing song. It's still on our soundtrack here. You'll hear it played over the sound waves every now and then. But he says, "We'll rest when we're dead and gone, but we're not home. So much to do now. We work for our fingers to the bone because love does." And one of our pillars here is service, and we talk about how love always serves, and there's this mentality that can carry with that. And so we see a broken world. We see people in need, people who are far from God, people who are lonely and hurting, and we have this drive to do something because love does stuff. We've talked about that a lot in here, is that love does something, and love that doesn't do something isn't love. It's sentiment. It's something else. And I want to argue that the foundation underneath that is some kind of self-help, self-care, self-health. I didn't mean self-help, I meant self-health. That you can't go very far with an empty tank, is what I'm going to get at today. And we're going to look at how do you recognize when your tank is starting to get empty, and how do you look at refueling and refilling, and how do you prevent it from ever getting to in that position in the first place. And that's kind of where I've been at in previous months, is just realizing my tank was very dry. And now realizing it's just bone dry. And I've said these words to my wife recently, is I got nothing to offer anybody because I didn't have anything myself. I didn't have the juice. And so we're gonna talk about it. We're gonna confront it. But I'm going to argue that everybody recognizes that self-care is important. But I'm going to argue that I think Jesus, kind of in a roundabout way, argued that it was imperative, that it's foundational. And somebody came to Jesus one time and said, of all the commandments, which is the most important? And hopefully by now, if I've done anything as a pastor, you guys know the answer to this question. And it's love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. He says that's the first and most important commandment. And then he says the second, he says, is like it. That somehow it's connected to loving God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. The second is they work together, and it's love your neighbor as yourself. And we recognize that as yourself part is in there, but we think of it more along the lines of, I should figure out, and it is the golden rule, I should figure out how I want to be treated and then treat other people that way. And there can be this temptation because love does, and we work our fingers to the bone, that becomes the driving force of our life, that we're always other-focused. And I think there's something a little bit healthier buried here. And it's confusing and it's conflicting, and I'm still, like, I wish I had the question mark on the title because I'm still not sure how to sort it all out. But there's this quote from Sam Snead, a famous golfer, that's talking about the golf grip. And the golf grip is the foundation of the entire golf swing. If you've got your grip wrong, if your grip is too tight, or if it's too strong, if your right wrist is rolled over too far or too weak, then it messes up the whole mechanics of the entire golf swing. Everything starts and ends with that grip and how effective your grip is. So most golfers, if you go to a teacher, they're going to look at your grip first. It's going to be the very first thing you look at. And Sam Snead said this about the grip. He said, you should grip the club as if you had a little baby bird in your hand. And so the idea is you want to grip it tight enough where it's not going to come flying out of your hands, but loose enough where you're not, forcing all your muscles into it. There's a lot of flexibility. It's like cracking a whip. A good golf swing is like cracking a whip. And so he uses this description. But what I want to point out here is that he's illustrating what you don't know by comparing it to something that you do know. And so he's saying a good golf swing the club well as if holding a baby bird. And I think it ties into, I think when we carry that mentality over to Jesus, love your neighbor as yourself, I think he's trying to do something here. He's going from what you should understand, or what could easily be understood as what you want, what you need, what you desire, to paint a picture of something that maybe you haven't quite grasped yet. And so I think it's fair to say, just like the foundation of the golf swing is the perfect amount of grip, the foundation of love, the foundation of the law, the foundation of the greatest commandment is found in something you should understand, is that it's okay to love yourself. It's not just okay, it's imperative. It's commanded in a sense. That loving yourself is really important to this entire gospel message and to the spread of the kingdom of God on earth. When Mr. Miyagi said, paint the fence, he said, block my attack by what? Wax on, wax off. Paint the fence. Scrub the floor, whatever it was he did. And it's the same type mentality. It's something that's been ingrained in you. The paint the fence thing became muscle memory. And now he's saying, this is how you defend yourself. And this feels really dumb right now, standing in front of you. But it was, I've taught you one thing. There's something that's ingrained in you now. There's something that's foundational. It's built in. And by holding on to that one thing, then you will know how to do the other thing. And I think that's what Jesus was trying to get at. By loving yourself well, by self-care, self-compassion. We so often will be people who show compassion to others and very little compassion to ourselves. We'll show mercy to others, but very little mercy to ourselves. We'll show forgiveness to others, but very little forgiveness to ourselves. And in some sense, these things are reciprocal. How you value yourself as a human being, how you see yourself, how you recognize that you are a masterpiece created by God with a purpose, is going to affect how you love others. And so they're codependent, or co-relative, I guess is probably a better term. They depend on one another. Or you've heard this, and you know where this comes from. They say, please place the mask over your own mouth and nose before assisting others. It's a mentality, if you pass out first, you got nothing to give anybody. So you need to get that oxygen. In a chaotic world, in a dangerous world, there's something about self-care first that equips you to do the unselfish thing. You kind of can't do the unselfish thing, the other-focused thing, unless you're doing it from a position of health. And this passage, the kenotic passage that we've touched on so many times in here at Daylight, in Philippians 2, it's where Paul says, let the whole church should be in one mind, one accord, one body, one unity, one faith, one, unity, 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 unity. And then he says, this is where your mind should be. So he says, here's the thing that you should be centered on. And he says, let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. Notice that also. So we see that and say, so I'm supposed to be more focused on others. And the passage does say, consider others more important than yourselves. So can you practice self-care and still consider others as more important? And I would argue that you can. And ultimately, you have one life that you're in charge of. One and only one. You can't spoon feed health to other people. You can't force health on other people. But the one person that you can do this with is yourself. So I'm arguing today that self-love, self-care, and self-compassion are not necessarily self-centered. They're not necessarily selfish. They can be, and that's where this tightrope comes along. Is on one end you've got caring for others, and on another end you've got caring for yourself. And if you primarily and solely focus on caring for others, and that's the drive of your life, the drive of your ministry, the drive of your entire world, you're going to burn out and die. You're not going to have, the tank will be empty, the tank will be dry, there will be nothing to offer anybody, and effectively the thing you want to do, you'll be incapable of doing. But then on the other hand, if you become totally self-consumed and self-reliant and self-centered, that's an unhealthy place to be too. And I admit I have lots of questions on how to find this balance, because Jesus said things like, he who seeks to find his life will lose it, but he who loses his life for my sake and for the kingdom of God will find it. And so how do we live a cross-centered, self-sacrificing, agape love and yet take care of ourselves? And I confess that I don't know all the answers, but I know that I'm becoming more and more aware of my own fragility, my own inability to love well without taking care of myself. And again, I don't know all the answers, but I do know this, that taking care of yourself is the foundation, or a foundation, of loving others, because Jesus said, love others as you love yourself. And that robbing ourselves of care robs others. When you leave yourself without strength and power, when you leave yourselves without focus or purpose because you've become bone dry, it robs the world of you. A healthy you is the best you for reaching the world. Even Jesus himself, and this really encouraged me, and I'm so conflicted about the sabbatical thing, because that ministry thing was so ingrained in me. You got to go, you got to go, you got to go, you got to do, you got to do, you got to do, you got to work, you got to work, you got to work. And it feels wrong. I'm really, really struggling with it. But I'm encouraged by Jesus, and I'm not trying to compare myself to Jesus, but it encourages me with this passage. It says, great crowds gathered to hear him and to be healed of their infirmities, but he would withdraw to desolate places and pray. Now, Jesus was walking around. Blind people were seeing for the very first time. Lepers were being healed, lepers and outcasts that couldn't exist in normal society. People with hungry bellies were being fed. He was walking on water. I mean, it was wild and amazing stuff going on. And imagine if you have this mentality of, I must minister, I must help, I must serve, I must work, I must do. And there's this massive crowd around you, and you have the ability to just touch and heal. I can't imagine the temptation that would be there to just do the job, to get it done, to continue on. And we find out that that's not what Jesus did. With the opportunity to blow people's minds with the miraculous and to heal people in ways that, they were just desperate and hungry for, he had the ability to do that, but instead, he would step away. That blows my mind. It doesn't make sense to me. And yet if I want to model my life after Jesus, if he's my everything, which he is, I have to pay attention to this. I have to care about this. And like I said, I still have a lot of questions, but when we talk about love, and I use this picture, Rusty said it looks like yo-yo, like some hip-hop dude, and I meant for it to be a kid hugging himself, but I guess the facial expression, he doesn't look very happy with himself. So that was the intention behind it. But I have a question for you. Which is more valuable when it comes to love? Love that is theoretical or love that is practical, or a love that is both? So you want to love yourself and recognize that you're a child of God, a son or a daughter of the Most High God, created in His image with inestimable value. But a lot of us don't treat ourselves like that. A lot of us say, yeah, I am that thing, but then we continue to strive, and we continue to try to be a better work of art, a better piece of art, something more glorious or glamorous or more influential or more helpful, instead of the realization that then allows it. So in some sense, love others as you love yourself. If you turn that on its head, it says you know how to love yourself because you know how to love others. These things work together. And when somebody needs mercy, what do you offer them? You offer them mercy. When somebody's tired, what do you try to offer them? You try to offer them rest. When somebody can't find forgiveness, you try to bring forgiveness to them. And what does that mean for yourself? And so you can tell a lot about how you ought to treat yourself based on kind of the golden rule and how it wraps around on itself, is that you ought to take care of yourself. Coming to the conclusion that I needed a sabbatical was really, really challenging. And I will confess that there's a lot of pride in that. And I have to say it, as, it's almost like when you enter into marriage and everybody always says marriage is challenging. And you think, well, not my marriage. Raising kids is difficult. Well, not my kids. Having a job is hard. Well, not my job. And it's the same with being a pastor, is I want to say, how could I ever be that pastor that's experiencing tremendous burnout? Like I'll never be that guy. I think I'm a child of the King. I'm all those things that I think I am. And in some sense, it's taken. I hope that's what's occurring in me. There's this humbling experience that says I'm pretty broken right now. The speaker at the TED Talk mentioned how we get clammy hands and like a chest-filled anxiety, like a feeling. And one of the things that's occurred with me recently is I really hope none of you have noticed it. And specifically, I had lunch with Mike Hawk this week, and I've got this twitch that's been occurring in my left eye. And I've never wanted to be the guy that does this, but it's almost like somebody's taken a syringe and is blowing air bubbles underneath my eyelid, and I can feel it vibrating. And it's started to occur more and more frequently. And I've also been experiencing my left arm, which that always feels like heart stuff because I've had some heart palpitations of late. And my left arm will kind of jerk in the middle of the night and do this and wake me up. And I've been reading about what all that is, and guess what induces it? It's all stress-induced. And I want to be the guy that says, but I spend my time with Jesus. I'm the pastor. I'm the guy that's supposed to have it all together. But I've got the twitchy eye thing going on, and I have to come to grips with the fact that it's just not true. It's just there's something off. There's something wrong. And so I'm kind of talking about where I'm at and where I've been, but I hope some of it's meaningful to you because I want to encourage you to recognize when you're starting to have an empty tank or when your tank is completely empty. Because again, how can you serve? How can you do love? How can you love well on an empty tank? How far can you get with no juice to drive you? And so you need to be aware of some of the warning signs that you're starting to experience kind of overload, and those include irritability, brain fog. Escapism means you're looking for some way to escape reality, whether that's through substance abuse or sex or binge watching or food. There's just all kinds of things that we use to escape reality. And when those things start to draw you further and further in and start to kind of own you, that's a pretty good sign that something is off. And sleeplessness or lack of motivation are signs. And in some sense, we paste this list, and probably most of you are like, oh, I see that one, maybe not so much that one, but we all experience stress in our lives. Life is just stressful. I saw this cartoon from the Awkward Yeti, and you may not be able to see it back there, but the heart in the first block is carrying past trauma, this big boulder of past trauma. And in the second block, it's been piled on a big rock that says bad news, a big rock that says pandemic, a big rock that says stress. And then in the third one, there's this little bird sitting on top of that. And as the heart is walking, there's this little step, this little lip in the heart's path. stopping its progression that says minor inconvenience. And coming to this minor inconvenience, carrying all this stuff, the heart breaks down and cries. And the brain says to the heart, I think you may be overreacting. And that's what we do to ourselves. We don't allow ourselves the liberty. We can do this for other people. It somehow comes easier for other people to recognize that you're carrying a tremendous burden. And I can understand why you feel the way you feel. But we have a really hard time doing it for ourselves. And so I just want to say you better recognize. It's so important that when you reach this point where the heart is broken, where you feel bone dry, that it's important to do what comes next, which is refuel. See, we are composed, and it's interesting how the great commandments tie together. It says you should love the Lord God with heart, soul, mind, and strength. And what do you think that means? When he says heart, soul, mind, and strength, what is he getting at? All of you, everything, the whole. And this paints a picture that ties into the next commandment of loving others as you love yourself, because we realize that we are made up of heart, which is the bed of emotion, soul, which is spiritual, mind, which is mental, strength, which is physical. We teach, and I've said it many times, that we are souls that live in bodies, but a lot of theologians argue that the world is not quite so dualistic, and I'm just starting to research that, but it shows that we're composed of more than just spirit, that we have bodies. In fact, when it says the renewal of all things will occur, when we talk about heaven, it says that we will be given a renewed body. We are bodily beings with minds and feelings and emotions. And so when we talk about loving God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, we're talking about loving him with everything, which means our physicality, our sexuality, the way we feel, our emotions, our irritability. All this stuff is like what I talked about last week, is that when we lay ourselves in front of God, that's what we're saying. We're saying, here I am, all of it, heart, soul, mind, and strength. And so talking about this tends to not sound very spiritual, because when I talk about refueling, I'm talking about things like hydration. Are you drinking enough water? I mean, it's a really simple, it seems silly, but that's a good place to start, is am I drinking enough water? Because you are a physical being in addition to being a spiritual being and a mental being and an emotional being. And they're all tied in together. Are you drinking enough water? Do you have enough nutrition? Are you meditating? Look at your sex life, and I won't go into that, but sexual tension and sexual confusion and a lack of sex, all of this ties into your physicality and part which ties into your spirituality and sleep. And I only put sex and sleep on one line because they fit together, not because they're necessarily totally related. But even vitamin D, just getting out and getting sun. Lots and lots of studies have shown people that live outdoors more often they get along better. They thrive more easily. And then depending on whether you're an extrovert or an introvert like me, that's what I've realized, is that I'm a desperate introvert. I have to have my me time or I'm toast. And so if you're an introvert, you'll start to recognize that in order to refuel, you have to get away, just like Jesus. See, Jesus was an introvert, so I'm an introvert because I'm like Jesus, right? So if you're an introvert, you've got to get away, but if you're an extrovert, you've got to get in community. And if one of those is lacking, it will drive you to the point of where you're carrying those burdens and you can't step over the minor inconvenience. And a lot of scientists nowadays are talking about the feeling mind versus the thinking mind, and how the neurons fire differently. And sometimes we exist in our feeling. We're such feeling-based people that we don't really logically process a whole lot, and that can leave you in a mess. Or you can be the other kind of person that just, you're analytical, you process everything, you question every word, and that can leave you in an emotional mess. And it's just to recognize which parts are suffering and feed those parts. And then moving. I've realized I had a back surgery about 2 years ago, and my golf game has suffered tremendously for it, to the point where last year I probably golfed 30 or 40 times or more, because I would get up at the crack of dawn and hit the course and walk 9 holes. And this year I've probably played 10 times. And there's something that happens in your physical body when you move your body and when you breathe that's important. And I've started to recognize that I'm not getting that dopamine surge, that serotonin surge that I need to experience kind of emotional normalcy. So I'm having to look for other areas. But what I'm saying is, when you need to refuel, we're not just talking about prayer, confession, Bible study, fasting, and giving, which are all really helpful. If you're a Scrooge that doesn't give of your time and resources, you're probably suffering, and your tank is probably dry. If you're not praying, then you're proud of the statistic. They say we think 60,000 words a day, and 80% of those are negative. And odds are, if you're not praying and meditating, you're right along with that statistic. And so I don't want to say it's not spiritual, but it's not entirely spiritual. There's other components. And I also want to say, get a job, you hippie, which is to quote the guy from Up, which seems counterintuitive to what I'm talking about. And what I mean by this is, rest isn't lack of motion. Rest isn't lack of work. In fact, the Sabbath idea comes after 6 days of work comes 1 day of rest. And so if you find yourself without purpose, without doing stuff is also central to this loving yourself well, is finding purpose and finding work. Work is important. And so it's not to say, take the rest of your life off. It's to say, work hard, take a breather. Work hard, take a breather. And that's a pattern that was established from the beginning of time, from the beginning of mankind. So much more that I'm going to skip, except to say that sometimes a trip to the ER is called for, and that's where I'm at. And I apologize that I've let myself get to this place, but I have. But I'm going to take some time, and I'm going to refuel. But one of my goals on this sabbatical is that I'm going to learn how to prevent an empty tank. I don't want to get to this place again. And so one of the things I'm going to process is, how do I start taking better care of my hydration and nutrition, meditation, and sex life, and sleep, and vitamin D? And the point is, they always say if you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated. That you should always consume fluids prior to thirst hitting. And that's what I've failed to do. That's why I've ended up where I am, is because I allowed myself to get dry instead of just continually feeding things like prayer, confession, Bible study, retreat, medicine, therapy. I have a friend who has had heart palpitations herself and just went in and found out her iron levels were low, and that's probably the reason for it. She thought she was having heart issues, and it was definitely some stress involved, but she got a medical diagnosis of low iron, and she started taking iron supplements and feels a whole lot better. Her strength is renewed. So some of it's medical. Go see your doctor. Go see your therapist. But when you kick the tires and you're saying that the treads are bare, the fluids are low, the gas tank is empty, I want to encourage you, don't apologize for topping things off. I struggle with this. I want to apologize to you guys that I'm taking a sabbatical. I really do. But I shouldn't. When the treads are dead, get new tires. When the gas tank is empty, refill it and do it without apology. Even if that means pulling over to the side of the road on a vacation when somebody says, "Why are you wasting our time?" Hey, we're going to get to the destination safely. Do it without apology. So why sabbatical? I've been studying them. I'm going to be real brief because I have a plan here that's going to require a few minutes. But one, they say a healthy pastor helps build a healthy church. Two, sabbatical often breeds healthy reformation. I'm hoping that when I come back from the church, it looks different than when I left. Then our pillars are service, study, worship, and duh. Our fourth pillar is rest, and I've done a lousy job. I might have done a good job about service and study and worship and talking about rest, but I haven't done a really good job of actually taking rest. So here's what you guys can do during my sabbatical. One, I appreciated Bill DeGoyer a couple weeks ago when I announced my sabbatical. He said, "We'll keep the light on for you," which sounded like the hotel ad. Notice he didn't say, "We'll keep the lights on for you." Like, please continue to give in the offering while I'm gone or the lights will get shut off. Please continue to do the church thing, show up. But I appreciated what he said because it indicated warmth. It was kind of him saying to me, "We've got this. And I need you guys to have this." Rusty and his team are going to do a great job. But I want to encourage you to step up. I've really appreciated the Whitakers. They've been communicating well, and they're taking over the Thursday night group and taking over the refugee ministry, and they know I'm going to be gone. And you get this vibe that the Whitakers have got this, and I've really appreciated that. And many of you have approached me and said, I've had a few people say, "I don't get it." But for the most part, you guys have said, "You need this. This is healthy, good. We've got this. All is well." And so I want to encourage you to be in that "We've got this" camp. And then finally, enjoy. We've got several speakers lined up. My sister Abby is going to be preaching for you next week. Craig Johnson is going to be coming up from Nashville. Becky and Rusty are going to be covering. So we've got great speakers covering on Sunday mornings. And I want to encourage you just to continue to enjoy church. And then finally, pray. And here's 3 things that you can pray about. One is that I will experience a guilt-free sabbatical. I think that's going to be the hardest part for me, is feeling like I'm cheating the system. And that anxiety can, like, preventing me from real rest. So just pray that, because I could tell you, take a sabbatical. You need a sabbatical. Here's some money. Go take a sabbatical. And I would feel great about that. There's something about it being me that makes me feel like I'm cheating, like I'm robbing somebody, or that I'm not doing my job, or I'm being lazy. And a lot of that's tied into that past that I've talked about. And then pray for me that something's going to break. I need to come. There's something heavy on me. There's something broken around me, and it needs to be torn down. And somebody asked me, Mike asked me this week, how will you know when your sabbatical is done? How will you know when it accomplished what it was supposed to accomplish? And the only answer I can give is that my juices will be flowing again. I want to be motivated. I love you guys. I love this church. But I found myself to the point where I just feel suffocated even walking through the door. I hate to admit that. I hate to confess that. But something's got to give. Something's got to break. So pray whatever that is, whether it's spiritual, physical, emotional, mental, whatever it is, just pray that thing tears down. And then also pray for Rusty. Rusty, would you come up here? I think I saw Rusty come in. Rusty is our executive leader. He's going to be the interim pastor while I'm gone, and so he's the guy in charge. And so when you ask who's got this, he's the guy that's got this. So I'm just going to put your cell phone on the thing, and they can call you anytime, day or night, right? Anytime, day or night. But Rusty has been dealing with some pretty hefty physical battles of late, and I wish I could give him a sabbatical. So there's this real weirdness there too that I'm carrying into this thing of, man, how can I dump this whole thing on him and Becky and Paul and the rest of the team? So pray for guilt-free sabbatical, something to break, and then pray for Rusty and his team. Do you have anything you want to say at all?